Hey, good morning, everyone. Good morning. Greetings and much blessings. Greetings and much blessings. Let me adjust my volume right quick. Hopefully that sounds good to everyone. Hope everyone has had a good one so far. As everyone starts to show up here, depending on who shows up for this particular live stream, just want to go over a few things right quick. And it actually ties in with today's topic, Generation Cobalt. So most people hear about indigo, but they never hear about cobalt. So as one may notice, for those that have been paying attention to my live streams, I try to make this shade of blue for my name a little brighter than indigo, because indigo is sort of a darker color blue. So I had to kind of lighten up the blue for cobalt, because cobalt on the color scale is it's a shade brighter than indigo. Okay, but with that said, so what's the reason or what's the deal behind Raider Romer? Much blessed to you, Aquarius. Good to see you. Good to see you. Let's see. What's the importance of the name Raider Romer? Well, Ray has been roaming out here, and humbly speaking, for those who may be gifted, they've also had a life of roaming, these young ones. You'd be surprised how many orphan children are actually gifted. A lot of orphan children out here are gifted, and sometimes the parents just abandon the child for their gifts, not really for what they deem as their curse. Like if they talk about like if the child's special needs or something like that. Sometimes parents don't like that the child is gifted either. Okay, because that represents a flaw in that parent or parents. Think about the tallest man that ever lived so far, I believe, in modern times. And not to say that the parents hated this guy. Let me see. I'm gonna try to look up this guy right quick while we're talking. Yes, Robert Wadlow. Robert Wadlow. If you look him up, he was the tallest man in modern times that ever lived. And he, let's see, he passed away, I think, in his late 20s, early 30s. Now, what do I mean by this? Is, if you look up Robert Wadlow, his real name is Robert Pershing Wadlow. He was, he reached a soaring height of 8 foot 11, which, if you think about it, that's tall to us, but that's not tall to that's not really tall in comparison to what we know now in regards to real giants. He just so happened to be a very tall person. But could we consider him a giant? Not quite. But yes, very tall person that was born to ordinary people. So how do I tie this in with the gifted child? Pushing not really pushing Wadlow aside, but let's kind of switch it up. So let's say two parents of a child that's gifted, whether physically or intellectually or talent wise, those parents were probably ordinary parents, you would say. And they had this child that they're very jealous about versus parents that Robert had that were supportive of even his growth. Literally, they supported his growth to 8 foot 11 inches. But that's also good when you have parents that support one's growth that is based on a child being gifted. Children that can sing like a girl that could sound just as good as Whitney Houston type of thing. Many things out there. Sometimes the parents push the child too hard too. That's another aspect of a parent being jealous as well. When parents try to live through their children, that's another story. So what do I mean by this idea of going back to Raider Romer? What does this all represent for me? Well, just because I know in my lifetime from what I've seen, and not really speaking about myself, humbly speaking, but throughout my days of roaming, I've just noticed how there's just this need of a generational change. We see all the time wasted talents. There are cemeteries full of talent that never had a chance to see the light of day, unfortunately. Okay. So I've known this for most of my life before I even knew this idea about Raider Romer. I've seen in churches how you have a lot of young children just wanting to have a voice. They're good in the choir, but at home, their living conditions is not up to great desire, meaning that they could be going back home to an abusive environment, despite how gifted they were. Michael Jackson had to go through that, by the way. Okay, so these are things that we have to think about a lot. So, kind of moving forward, I'll give more hints out there about why does Raider Romer exist out here like this, but just sort of giving y'all a little bit to think about for now. So going forward, let's break down this generation Cobalt, shall we? All right, so 1 second, y'all. All right, so breaking down generation Cobalt. Okay, so this is all going to take place after generation Z. Now, for those who haven't checked out my live stream about Generation Indigo here at this channel, I highly recommend that you do so. So check that out. Maybe some of you all, especially on the replay, need to check out Generation Indigo first before you listen to the rest of this live stream about Generation Cobalt, because cobalt comes before indigo. If you look at the color shades, once again, cobalt is a lighter shade of blue than indigo. Indigo tends to be a little bit, it tends to be a little more richer in its hue, in its concentration. Some could say even saturation, but up to you, however way you want to look at it. Either way isn't a wrong way, you know. But the thing about what's going on in Generation Z is a lot of them are still trying to find themselves, and I totally get it. So, whichever generation is Generation Z, this is for you, especially, but even for parents of Generation Z, and for those who want to know, who don't know, that age range of Generation Z, if we're looking at it right now, given the date of this live stream, its ages between 9 years old and 24 years old. That is Generation Z. Okay. So basically, for those who were born in the mid to late 90s and and also into the early 2010s, if you will, those are the Generation Zers, if you will. So basically, those born between 1997 and 2012, those are the Generation Zs. Okay. So this is for y'all, because you're the last frontier until the newness comes near on this planet. And I've talked about before how this Earth is not that old. They say it's billions and millions of years old, but based on true fossil records and scripture, this Earth is not millions or billions of years ago. It's not millions or billions of years old. It's actually just a few thousand years old. The Earth is young. The Earth is not old. Besides, if you believe in scripture, you would know that the creator is not he's not trying to waste too much time with bad creation. This what we see going on in history and society right now is the creator's refinement of the bad populace of what we call human beings. And so change is taking place as we speak, little by little. So this refinement that I'm talking about, this refinement will be refined beyond Generation Z. No, the world will not end. I repeat, the world will not end at Generation Z. Notice I said that. The world will not end. Yes, the world will not end at Generation Z. There shall be another generation after that. Now, my previous live stream of Generation Indigo, I hinted that yes, beyond Generation Z is Indigo, but actually, right before Indigo is actually Generation Cobalt. Now, just to give you a brief overview about Generation Indigo, I said in the previous live stream about Generation Indigo is that it's based on star seeds coming together, procreating, giving birth to star seeds. Well, as good as that sounds, we're not quite there yet. Not at all. Not by a long shot. Not by a long shot. So prior to that will be Generation Cobalt. How do we get to Generation Cobalt? Well, what we're finding out is that in Generation Z, they are starting to see that they have certain gifts, albeit they might still procreate with someone that is worldly. But every now and then, as they say, sometimes greatness skips a generation, right? So, what possibly happens out of Generation Z is that one, some of the gifted Generation Z people or could be represented as someone from a previous generation to them, from like, I don't know, baby boomer, Generation X, I don't know. But someone from the previous generation to them were very gifted. That gene skipped down to them being Generation Z, but they haven't had a chance to refine themselves yet as they're trying to find themselves. So what happens there usually is he might or she might still get around someone that's pretty worldly, okay? And so you end up having offspring, but somehow that offspring does still possess certain gifts from the generation prior to Generation Z. Okay, so this child could possibly be born with such great gifts. However, this child is not a true indigo child, not yet. Okay, so cobalt is basically a refinement from previous generations, but not all the way there yet. The children are becoming more gifted as the Generation Z starting to realize that they want to break previous curses of their family and things like that. They want to move better and you know what I'm saying they want to do more. They're realizing that, you know, they want their children to be better off than they ever were. They obviously wanted to be better off than their parents, grandparents, but they want to make sure that their children are better off based on just their gifts. Shalom deliberate. Shalom, shalom. So that's what's going on. I'm trying to piece all this together. So I'm trying to see like the way when they say, you know, animals breed and stuff like that. Well, guess what? Humanity breeds too. It's just time that we get right to the point. I don't know why this term breeding seems to be such a bad thing to talk about. Now, I also said this in a previous live stream, okay, of Generation Indigo, that there could possibly be a Generation A, right? After Z, they say A. Of course, I don't see it as a going backwards with the lettering, okay? That's what the world does, okay? So there's an article, and I might put this in the description section on the replay, but it talks about Generation A. Okay. And so basically, they say that beyond Generation Z is a generation called Generation A. And the way they look at it is They say Generation A is Generation Alpha. It starts with children born in 2012 and will continue through at least the year 2025, maybe later, approximately 2048. Well, approximately 48 million people in the U.S. I think that's what this article is trying to say. But yeah, nevertheless, Generation A, they say it's going to be after Generation Z, and A stands for Alpha. That's what they say, right? But see here, um, this article goes into more detail as well as far as saying why do they name generations after the alphabets. But I won't. I'll just like I said, I'll put this in a replay for those to check this out if you want to check it out, right? So but in my previous live stream of Generation Indigo, I described Generation A as something else. I'm not sure if I did or if I didn't, but I'm going to do it here. For me, Generation A does not stand for Alpha. Generation A for me stands for Angel, Generation Angel, because it's about the star seeds. Star seeds are of angelic qualities, okay? Gifted qualities, okay? So there's one more thing I think this article could highlight. Give me a second. Um, it talks about the description of the generation X, Ys, and Zers. And I'm going to get to the generation A because that's kind of where we're on right now. What is beyond generation Z? Okay. And so they haven't really came up with new names or ideally each generation has typical nicknames and things like that, but they said right now, I guess that's what they mean by this 48 million. They're saying, I guess, any child that's been born from 2012 onwards represents generation A, allegedly. And so far of that generation, 48 million children have been born so far for that generation. And I guess I'll read some of the descriptions of Generation A based on this article. Not too much. Like I said, I'll just leave the link for y'all. But what they're saying is beyond Generation Z, uh, they're saying the alpha generation, they're being raised in homes with a lot of devices, a lot of new technology, all this technology. They're pretty much born into it. And I get that. Like, I always, like, one time I was in Dallas and I saw a child immediately know how to ride an electric bike and scooter. I'm thinking back in my day, I had to learn how to ride a bike, not an electric bike or scooter. You had to actually learn how to ride manually a bike. This new generation won't have to learn how to ride bikes. They just jump on things and go because everything's now moving electrically and everything like that. So if you can catch the meta side of that, then that's where I'm coming from. The I guess you could say even beyond all the gifted stuff that I'm saying, just even an average child born beyond Generation Z will have some sort of metaphysics to them, if you will. In metaphysics, that's sort of misleading of a word, but I'll talk about that later. But just in a nutshell, yes, a lot of children beyond Generation Z, this quote unquote alpha generation, shall have a lot of metaphysics about them. Okay. Uh, they said something also in regards to finances. They said like a lot of the alpha generations, some of them uh, they won't have the same banking habits that we do now. They'll be totally different. I've explained about this to some behind the scenes about the financial changes that that next generation will be having. It's going to be very different. It's going to be a lot of touchless things, if you will. So, yeah, becoming more meta. Like I said, they're gonna have more of a metaphysical side to the way they do things and even their behavior. Okay, so but I want to go more into that, but let's get kind of back to the title at hand. 1 second. Getting back to the title at hand. So what is going to happen? So notice I said meta, but that's not the same thing as a child that is naturally gifted, born gifted. Meta and gifted are two different things. Let's keep that in mind, y'all. Okay. So You will have children that will be born around a lot of technology, born because of technology, born with technology. But there are other children who were born without a lot of those influences, and yet they are very gifted. They can see things, they can hear things, they can know of things. Now, like I said, beyond Generation Z, from what I'm talking about in regards to Generation A, when I say Generation Angel or Generation A for me is not going to be in one generation. Generation A is going to develop, and it's going to take several generations to develop Generation A. My definition of Generation A, that is. You said deliberate. X-Men story is based on this Generation A. Bingo. Bingo. You got it. Hit the nail. Hit the nail. Let's go. So, um, but with Generation Cobalt, it tends to want to refine itself, purified itself from even the advancements of Generation A, because there's going to be a lot of influences. Their Generation A. Generation Cobalt represents my interpretation of Generation A, aka Generation Angel. Okay, which, as I said, shall take several generations to develop versus their definition of Generation A only limited to one generation. Okay. So, yeah, Generation Cobalt basically is still the children of Generation Cobalt, like I said, they won't necessarily be the offspring of gifted parents. They're going to be like like I said, what was that guy named? Robert. Yes, Robert Wadlow. I believe that's what his name was. They're going to be like that. They're going to be extraordinary children born amongst ordinary parents. That's what Generation Cobalt is going to be like for the most part. They're going to be either that, or you might have a child that might have certain gifts that skip the generation, but he still or she still procreates with someone that's more worldly. And that's kind of like something, even in scripture it tells us, uh be not conformed to this world, be transformed by the renewing of the mind. And this is a great scripture whether you are gifted or not. But one can only imagine Generation A is actually going to become more worldly or become more meta, if that makes sense to y'all. Okay. So, where Generation Indigo comes in is all these extraordinary children that were born out of nowhere, because literally they're going to be born out of nowhere. They're going to be born amongst ordinary parents, like Robert Wadlow was, right? But all these extraordinary children start to come together to procreate. That's what shall produce Generation Cobalt. I mean, that's what shall produce Generation Indigo. But prior to this, Generation Cobalt, it shall be a lot of Generation Z individuals giving birth to even more extraordinary children. But a lot of the Generation Z individuals, whether they're gifted or not, always wanted to have a better and healthier life for their child in some way, shape, or form. Albeit the numbers, eh, won't be as many. There's going to be a lot more of the worldly Generation A versus the angelic Generation A. So, um, with that said, like, that's the battle. That's what's going on. And then think about this, y'all, because I guess yeah, the worldly Generation A, or we could just stick with the what I saw, what I found out online. You know, with this being the Alpha generation. So the Angel Generation A versus the Alpha Generation A. That's what's going to be going on. Okay. So one has to, I guess, in the days to come of Generation Z, it's going to be deeper than just making sure you make sure that your child doesn't get around someone that has STDs or not. You're going to have to wonder, is this person that my child is going to be with, are they more meta or not? You know, meta doesn't necessarily mean beta. It could just mean beta, but I don't want to go too deep on y'all. Okay, we just keeping it light for now. Raider Roma tries to tread lightly, so keep that in mind. Okay, so we can go deeper in that. We're 25 minutes in, but I want to kind of get off to some other things I want to talk to y'all about because we're trying to really break down this generation Cobalt. So just to summarize once again, and I'll constantly summarize just in case there are new people checking this out on a replay or people in the clouds coming in here and there. But to summarize, Generation Cobalt is the generation after Generation Z. Not the only generation after Generation Z, but the gifted generation after Generation Z. And these are extraordinary children that were born amongst ordinary parents for the most part. Okay. But eventually, these extraordinary children are going to find themselves not really feeling right in this world. And they're going to want to meet up with other extraordinary children like themselves. And then they both realize that they're going to develop Generation Indigo because two gifted people coming together to procreate shall make gifted people. Okay. But then Generation Indigo improves upon the previous generation of procreating with each other to refine the gifts that they have, right? So there's going to be a mixture of children that are born amongst other from gifted parents, or there's going to be a mixture of children that are gifted, but they were born amongst a parent that was that was gifted, and maybe the other parent wasn't gifted. Cobalt is going to be a very mixed generation, but however, Generation Cobalt is going to be way more gifted than Generation Z, and they're going to refine that and make a Generation Indigo after that. So continuing to refine themselves to come back to this place of being more gifted because we wonder why, we say history repeats itself. Well, look at all the technology, things back in the day, how they built these things, these monuments, these temples, these artifacts that we look up, that we cannot explain, that modern man has not been able to duplicate, replicate, because those generations were more divine. And over time, those divine generations became more corrupted. Not to say they were corrupt, but they became more corrupted. But what we're seeing is a swing of things, if you will, take place where we're starting to see that refinement come back. And we're seeing that through some of Generation Z right now as we speak. As long as they don't get too caught up in worldly things or meta things. You said deliberate. Yes, Generation A, angel, spirituality, righteous versus meta, alpha. Yep, bingo. Oh, yeah. So let's continue on with this. You said also deliberate. Righteous, cobalt, Generation A, angel DNA creates indigo. Bingo. Yes, 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 yes. You get it. You get it. hmm So we're not even at cobalt yet. We're at Generation Z. We're there. But don't be surprised though. We start to see um, some very gifted children amongst Generation Z, but it's more or less they represent genes that skip the generation. They're still not going to know who they are, and they're still probably going to end up mixing with worldly people, just hoping that they're not as meta. But Cobalt is just going to be the result of those things and those decisions made by Generation Z because a lot of them do want their children to be better than they've ever seen in times prior, at least known times prior, if you will, based on modern history recordings and things like that. I really hope that this is really something that everybody's grasping. If you got any confusion about it, as long as you're respectful, comment in the comment section below for those listening to this on the replay. Okay. Um, let's see something. Let me here's the thing I want y'all to really understand. Like the Bible talks about a gifted child, but in a different way. But it really represents what a gifted child is. Okay. In James chapter 1, verse 17, it tells us that every every gift is from the Creator. Okay. Every gift. So a gifted child, that's one thing to think about. He has gifts from the Creator. Now, in Isaiah chapter 66, verse 33, go further in scripture where it says the Creator created the family, and children are a gift from him. Basically, every child should be born gifted because they are a gift from him, a divinity, a divine vessel. Children should be born with pretty much the same godly abilities that they get from the Creator. But, as a lot of Christians say, we're born into sin. Well, that born into sin takes away some of those gifts, or it hides some of those gifts. That's why a lot of us go through life and we're trying to untap and unlock a lot of these different gifts that we could have. Some of us have it, some of us actually don't. Some of us have more gifts than others. But we go through life trying to untap, unlock, and tap into all these different gifts that we possibly have. We see the way we move in life. There's something to this. Trying to figure this out, trying to see like why my life is going this way. And it could be just because of the gift that's already in you that you represent. So there are, as I would say, the gifted amongst us right now, and we have yet to know what that really is. And every day, you must literally pray about it. Okay? Pray about it or become prey. Because the opposite of that is predator, predator, predator. Okay? Something about a predator, predator. Talk about that later. Basically, this is someone that is trying to get at you before your date of unlocking and tapping into your gifts. Okay? Something I want y'all to think about. Let's go forward. Let's go forward. The creator says in about gifts and talents. Um, we are blessed to be a blessing. Genesis chapter 12, verse 2. So that's really the purpose of having gifts. They're a gift. You're gifted to give. See, our gifts are for us to give. And of course, with Generation Z, they realize that this world is lacking gifts. It's lacking giving. Innovation actually is a gift. Okay. Manipulation actually is a curse. Think about that. Okay. But see, these attributes of our lack of giving, Generation Z has caught on to. And some of them want nothing to do with the way this world is going as we speak. Um, wicked things, there's a lot of wicked things going on in this world right now. A lot of wicked things, a lot of mandatory things that some try to impose upon humanity. A lot of stuff going on. A lot of the Generation Z want nothing to do with it. There are others representing the Generation Z that unfortunately are becoming more meta as well. And they're going to think that through a lot of mandatory things and just accepting the world for what it is, they're going to think that they're supernatural when all they're becoming is just a supercomputer. Not supernatural. There's a difference. Okay. But there's more to that I want to explain. A lot more. We're going to get into this. We're 35 minutes in. I want to give y'all a decent amount of time on this live stream so that everyone can kind of think about this and look for yourself. Now, I've mentioned this before, okay? And it was in Genesis. I was talking about this in Generation Indigo on that live stream. And it was talking about how, of course, the sons of God came into the daughters of men, okay? And so let me see. I want to give y'all the actual scripture. Let me see this. Maybe that's not it. Basically, it talks about what took place with what happened. Let me see this here. So, all right. So here's the deal here. Let me do this right quick. Give me a second. What I want to do is the scripture that I'm trying to look up for y'all is when it talked about when the sons of God came into the daughters of men. But what took place with that was that not only did this create giants, this also created men of old and renown. Keep that in mind, the old and renown part, okay? Because let me see this here. Give me a second. And yeah, by the way, if y'all got any questions, feel free to let me know in the chat, and even those in the on the replay in the comment section below. Let me see this here. Um, there's gotta be. Where's that scripture go? Like I said, this is live. This is live. Okay, so I think it's in Genesis 4, if I'm not mistaken. Genesis 4. Let me start here, and let me see this here. Yeah. Blah 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 blah. Okay, it's. I think it's in Genesis chapter 3. It's probably in Genesis chapter 3, if I'm not mistaken. So, um, what we're gonna do is from here, I'm gonna break down this. Let me go back. Yes, Genesis. Someone just popped me up with a scripture. I appreciate that. See, I got people behind the scenes showing me scriptures too. So yeah, this is well, here's the deal. Um overall, this idea of men of old and renown, that's kind of what I want y'all to think about. The old and renowned part. So this was the start of the curse and this idea of where meta comes from. These are not gifted people. Okay. The men of old and renown that were born from the sons of God mixing with the daughters of men. Okay. These are not gifted people. These are cursed people. But these people pretty much they brought upon this earth a lot of the technology, a lot of the things that we come to know now, like weapons and metals and even makeup and things like that. Whereas the people that were gifted actually never possessed a lot of weapons, a lot of metals, a lot of makeup. Everything that the gifted people had, it came to pass with just a thought. Whereas it's taken many eons or generations for meta to catch up with just the thought of someone that's truly gifted or supernatural. Okay. So this idea of men of old and renown, I really want y'all to think about that. I really want y'all to think about that because that's kind of where this all going with the meta side of things. The meta side of things. That's where all this is going. But that's where Generation Cobalt comes in. Generation Cobalt comes in. It actually comes in Genesis 6:4. Comes in Genesis 6:4. There we go. I was looking for that scripture, by the way. So for those who are like, hey, where are we going with this? There. That's where I went with. Okay. Genesis 6:4. The Nephilim were on the earth both in those days and afterwards. Okay? Afterwards. Keep that in mind. In those days and afterward. Okay? When the sons of God came to the daughters of mankind and bore them children, they were powerful men of old, the famous men. Okay? So some of the men were giants, and some of the men, these men of old, what are these men of old? You know, there's more to this, and I want to probably talk about this in kind of a sidebar live stream in regards to this men of old, because this is representative of what their definition of this is representative of what their definition of Generation A is coming to be. These men of old actually are what is meta now. Okay, these men of old. Basically, these men of old over time have kept certain information that a lot of us, you know, you got people in conspiracy channels they talk about now too. But basically, there's information that they know about that the rest of the world doesn't know about. These men of old that were born from Nephilim. Not everyone that was born from Nephilim was necessarily a giant, but they were men that were born and they had certain knowledge, certain divine knowledge, actually. Okay. But they're making it more into a technological and meta thing because they realize they're not fully gifted. They're not, I won't say they aren't truly gifted, but they're not fully gifted. Okay. So that's what I wanted to talk to y'all about, just in regards to that. Keep in mind this whole idea of the men of old in scripture in Genesis chapter 6, verse 4. Okay. So there's even so much more that we could break down with this. Like, oh my goodness, this idea of the men of old. Okay. So people that started to live for a long time. That's another thing. And it's not meta trying to get it to where people can live for a long time through microchips and things like that. You know, back in the days, it was just a matter of getting a lot of transplants and heart surgeries. Now it's just a matter of a microchip. Even Elon Musk spoke on that. Musk, he spoke on if everybody just received a microchip to be smarter, it could even help your body heal. It could help kind of throw off the signals of your brain that are telling you, well, it's time for you to die in the next few years. No, this chip will kind of rewrite your brain and make it to where you can live a little longer than what the brain has tried to process you to think, literally. Uh, but yeah, I wanted to talk about this. Speaking of Elon Musk, see, he he sees his child as like one of the first meta children. Okay, some can probably say even mega children, but I say meta because that's how it is all coming to be. The mega children probably represent the cobalt, the indigo, the gifted ones, these mega supernatural children. But the meta is kind of like what we could possibly see in our time very soon. And even Elon Musk is kicking it off because his child actually represents Generation A, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure how old Elon Musk's latest child is, but the funny thing about his child that he just had, his child does not have a name. He gave his child a number instead of a name. Okay. So, what do I mean by this? Let me see something. Let me just type this in so I can give y'all a better idea. Let me see. His child's name is very unique. So his child's name is weird to where it's like it starts with the letter X, and then it's like a mixture of the letter A and E, and then A-12. Some people just pronounce the child's name as A-12, but he probably wouldn't like that. He would think that's a disrespect. But as you can see, like he's making it to where his child and see how old is this child here? Child was born in May the 4th, 2020. This was his first ever numbered child versus named child. See, keep that in mind. He has a numbered child, not named child, because he's thinking in his mind like, and I'm not saying this like to bash Elon Musk or nothing, but in his mind he's thinking like, well, I'm thinking about Mars and children on Mars. This next generation that I see coming up will have different names. They shall live on a different planet. It shall be totally different. So, uh, but he's Generation X, if I'm not mistaken. So keep that in mind. The Generation X speaking about someone of Generation A. Hey, it's interesting. I just want y'all to keep this in mind. Like this is out here. Okay, this is out here. It's out here. Okay. You said deliberate. Predators prey on the gift of spiritual righteous seed before they realize who they are. The predators want to invest the creator angel DNA with sickness by making the angel star seed wicked in gifts. Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And that's basically what the fallen angels did when they came down to the daughters of man. All right. So continuing on with this. So I just kind of broke that down to y'all basically with Elon Musk. I gave y'all an example, a core example of what generation A from the meta side is going to look like. Generate the alpha generation. He's literally, and if you even notice, like A12, A in his child's number, not name, um, A alpha. You have the letter A already to describe that child. So he's thinking alpha already about that child. So I gave y'all just a great example of that. Okay. Um, an example of the angel generation. What does that look like? Well, really, we see it all around us. The world is not pushing for us to know of these real life angels. No, they want you to know of these real life alphas, not these angels. Okay, so that put things in context there, alpha versus angel, right? So, yeah, so they probably wouldn't want to admit that, alpha angel is actually above alpha. But in this world, everything is alpha. Even people on social media, um, notice how everybody likes to flock to channels that talk about all things alpha in regards to being the best version of yourself and things like that is alpha. Well, in context of what the world, global populace is looking at in regards to the world, alpha for them means the generation that's going to start it over, the best generation there ever was in these times up to this very point, and they're going to kickstart the future the way it needs to be going forward, introducing the meta, having it to where they could try to live as long as they can live based on what they've seen in scripture and other points of canon in regards to spirituality. Okay. Like alpha is like, it means a lot. It means a lot to a lot of multi-billion-dollar corporations and investors too. Um, while they was working on a lot of different, I would say, medical alternatives to the pandemic, they were also working on genetic alternatives to the pandemic that shall help out with spearheading this idea of Generation Alpha, Generation A versus Generation Angel, Generation A. Keep that in mind. Let's go forth though. There's more I want to unpack with y'all. Got a few more minutes in this live stream. And this idea of cobalt children, okay? What is cobalt children? What really is it? Because I've sort of talked about it, but I haven't really talked about it like you think I have. I've sort of given y'all an idea of what it could be like, right? But what it's really like is it's a little different. It's a little different, okay? It's a little different. So let's go there. What is an actual cobalt child? Cobalt children actually exist right now, but it's not what you think it is, okay? But it can actually represent the majority of children that live in this world, okay? I say world. So when I say cobalt child in my lingo, I'm actually talking about from a certain part of the world where this is very visible, okay? Cobalt. When I say cobalt, think of cobalt mines, where they mine cobalt for what? Cars. What kind of cars? Electric cars. Which ones? Like Tesla. Tesla, what? Ran by Elon Musk. See how I tie that in together? Okay. So, but you go on Tesla's website, and I'm not bashing Tesla either. They say Tesla does not and will not tolerate the use of slave or child labor in the manufacturing of products. So that's their conflict minerals policy that they have uh, at Tesla Motors, that is, and probably Tesla Incorporated too, because Tesla Motors and Tesla Incorporated are not the same thing. I believe they're two separate companies. Correct me if I'm wrong for all those that are into Tesla. But Tesla has a Tesla Motors, which is dedicated to cars, and they have a Tesla Incorporated that's into all other things Tesla, which are still electric products, but just not cars. One second. Okay, but yeah, this cobalt mining is real, and there are cobalt children because they use children to mine cobalt for these electric cars. Because part of cobalt goes into, I believe, the uh, computer chips of these cars, but they're also used for meta as well. Why do you think like even the color meta? Ironically, if you y'all gotta understand, it's like there's an art to even advertisement, not just the words, but the color of the words. If you look at meta, notice how the color of the word meta is actually the color blue. Now, is it cobalt? I'll leave that up to y'all to think about that. I can't give y'all the answer. I don't know the answer, but I just know that the color of meta, the word itself, is blue, or it's a color of the blue. It's a hue of the blue. Which hue? Which hue of the blue? We don't know. Could it be cobalt? Who knows? Who knows? I'm just saying. Okay, but there are other countries that use child labor to mine out this cobalt. Even some say even Nike does. Anything that represents something electronic, because you know on some of Nike's latest shoes they do have electronics on it, especially if you're a runner trying to keep track of your time, or you want a self-lacing shoe. Well, that's going to take some type of electric product for that to take place. And cobalt actually is effective with electricity. Now, how is it effective with electricity? For another time, I don't want to go too deep in detail, but it is. And that's why it is used heavily by a lot of electric companies and people that implement a lot of electricity in their products, like even Apple, you know. So, um, but yeah, even in like the Congo, they mine cobalt there. Okay, so here's this. Okay, here's this. Why is cobalt a problem? Because uh, a lot of wastewater is generated from mining cobalt, but a lot of exposure to cobalt itself can lead to cancer, as they say, right? So, what is this about cobalt? Is it toxic to humans? Well, according to certain sources, from what I've gathered, it is. So, I'm talking so much about Generation Cobalt. What is your point, Ray? What is this? You made it seem like Generation Cobalt so great, but Is it toxic? Well, I said that generation cobalt represents a refinement of the previous generation. Okay, so you have to mine out the cobalt from the previous generation. It's going to be a little toxic. Okay, it's going to be a little toxic, but as a result, you're now able to mine. You've been able to mine that cobalt from the previous generation. And then the next step from there is actually getting rid of the cobalt in order for it to become indigo. Now, in general, they say the reason or the way cobalt is toxic to humans is it could be harmful to the eye, skin, heart, and lungs. It could cause cancer. A lot of workers have been harmed from long exposure to cobalt and cobalt containing products. So, um, when it's used in things like electric vehicles, it has to be highly protected, kind of like if it was a nuclear reactor. Look at like a lot of electric cars, the way they're roaming around these streets with cobalt products in it. You're basically, with every electric car, you're driving around with a micro nuclear reactor in it. Real talk. Okay. Now, removing cobalt from your body, there's different ways. Um, uh, but you have to take on some certain acids, things like that. It's mostly in your blood. Okay. So think about it. Cobalt, generation, bloodline. See? Let's go. You said deliberate. Metaverse was created to target generation Cobalt Generation A to make them into evil, wicked, bad alpha parents to influence the next generation indigo to be a wicked generation. Bingo. You got it. You got it. So but we see that there's a need for more cobalt. But guess what? A lot of people are realizing that electric cars are becoming more of a problem than a solution, even though they think that, oh, over time it'll pay itself off because it's more efficient than using internal combustion engine. Well, tell Formula One different. For those who know what I'm talking about with the sports car sector called motorsports sector called Formula One, why is the next generation of Formula One cars going to be powered off synthetic fuels instead of becoming all electric instead? Hmm, they know something that some of us don't know. Obviously, they do. So, with that said, I look at it no different. For us, we're starting to see that even amongst our generation here, becoming more meta, uh, having more cobalt influence in becoming meta is not going to make you better. It's going to actually make you more beta. Okay. So this is what I mean by generation cobalt in a nutshell. I know that was a lot I threw at y'all. There's still a little more I want to get out the way with y'all. Okay. Um, and I'm going to be doing this in the next few live streams to come. But I hope everybody enjoyed this one, especially once I start to talk more about this men of old and renown, okay? Because it's all leading to what we see now with this next generation of A. There's going to be two generations of A, two A's, not triple A, just double A batteries. All right, you said deliver it. Our Creator will filter the filthiest of generation cobalt into the generation indigo. Bingo. Because at least the thing is, right? Why are they extracting so much cobalt for electric cars? Well, there's a lot of value in cobalt, obviously, in the way it conducts itself, literally, the way it conducts itself. So, generation cobalt, um, basically, these next generation to come, these children that are coming up, maybe they're going to be more artificial, maybe they're going to be more transhuman, but their inspiration has been from a place of just wanting to find a way to make it in this world, even if you don't believe in your own gifts. And that's really sad when you don't even believe in your own gifts. But as I said, some children will actually be born not gifted because they're not a gift, unfortunately. Okay, a lot of them were born as a curse, as I said before. You know, with the sons of God that the sons of God that came into the daughters of men. Okay, now I'm gonna give y'all a little nugget here. Okay, because I said I wasn't going to digress, but I might as well say this. Okay, so it's not necessary to create electric cars, mainly for the batteries for electric cars, because electric car batteries, not regular cars, but electric car batteries use cobalt. Okay, but they're trying to switch batteries, and Elon Musk was, I think he was talking about this too. I think he was trying to switch. They got this thing now with Tesla they're trying to make called a million-mile battery, which I think is free of using cobalt. Um, but yeah, I mean, for the longest though, everybody, mobile devices, you name it, just cell phones, the tablet that I'm using, anything that's electric, okay, has a need for cobalt. Um, so yeah, for the longest, Teslas have used cobalt, but as of late, they've been using some cobalt-free batteries as of late. So in half of the new cars that Tesla produces, uh, those half of those cars have been cobalt-free. Okay, so think about, actually, ironically, the way that Tesla is trying to free its electric cars of using cobalt in these batteries. The same thing is occurring with generation cobalt, given that cobalt was what mined from the previous generations. You had to go into the dirt, into the filth of the previous generations, into the toxicity of the previous generations to mine out that toxic cobalt itself in order to get rid of it from the earth, from the bottom, the deep parts that it came from. Okay. So much more I want to say to this, but ironically, um, the meta shall become more cobalt like. I won't say they're going to be cobalt, but definitely more cobalt like. They want to seem more angel like, whereas the true angelics wants nothing to do with the cobalt and actually just refine its true blue from cobalt to indigo. Like, man is always a few steps behind true creation. Okay. Man is always behind true creation. Okay. But yeah, cobalt, on the side note, is definitely a primary metal in lithium ion batteries. And like I said, it's pretty much in everything that we have. It's in everything that we have, cobalt batteries. Just anything cobalt. Got a new person in the building, food tech, know your OG. Good to see you for the first time. I appreciate you stopping by. But yeah, on that note, y'all, hope y'all take care. Y'all continue to be blessed. I'll be back with another one. And I think I'll just be kind of sort of going over some more details of what truly embodies what we see right now with the generations beyond Generation Z, and how in many ways, regardless of if the next generation beyond Generation Z is more super based on super how can I put this, y'all? How can I put this? Supernatural or Superman made. Okay? But we shall see these children coming up. They're going to be very different than what we see now. But the irony is, if you look at back in the day and we see the way children were, they were more supernatural. They had better genetics. Men had more testosterone. Women had more estrogen. Yes, I must say it. They always talk about how men back in the days had more testosterone. Look at them. but they forget how women back in the days had more estrogen, meaning they were more feminine back in the day. So you mean to tell me a microchip is going to make somebody's child more feminine or masculine in the future? Wow. I'm done, y'all. I'm going to leave it at that, and y'all continue to be blessed. See y'all on the next one.